AI can really help at the prototyping stage, at the exploring stage, in a way that is really just increasing the creativity and the quality of the product. But then you can also see that the same person that now is liberated and can do their own production is taking away a job from the person that before was an audio engineer helping in a studio to do that production. So there are always different sides that you have to look at.
G'day everyone, I'm John Harrington, Assistant Professor of Bioethics and Health Humanities, and I'm joined today by Xiao Duan, a Professor at the Hagen School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, Rachel Roberts, an Associate Professor at the Eastman School of Music, and Raphael Barassi, a Professor in the Warner School of Education and Human Development. Today, we're here to discuss something that has captured a lot of attention in the popular press, the use of generative AI, Gen AI, to create art, specifically music. Now, computers and technology have had a long history in music creation, from synthesizers through digital transcription programs and semi-automated audio mixing. But there's been major leaps and breakthroughs in the past few years, and we now have the ability to generate a fully realized piece of music with lyrics and instrumentation simply by typing a text description of what we want into an AI system. And this has created, I think, a lot of pressing questions. How is AI changing musical practice? What does it mean for music as a profession? Can we make good art with AI? And what kinds of ethical obligations do we have when we use AI to create music? So to help us answer those questions today, we're talking with an interdisciplinary team who have been working on a collaboration funded by the National Science Foundation to build an open AI-powered music production ecosystem that empowers musicians with the tools, training, and ethical guidance. So what I'd like to do now is just go around the table and please introduce yourself, your focus, and your research related to AI. Xiao.
Hello, everyone. My name is Xiao Duan, and I'm a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I also teach in the Audio and Music Engineering program. My research is on music AI and audio AI. So we develop and design AI systems that can understand, process, and also generate music, speech, and sounds in general. So I'm very glad to be in this panel today.
Fantastic. Rachel.
I'm Rachel Roberts, Professor of Music Leadership at Eastman School of Music and also Director of the Institute for Music Leadership. And IML, for short, really creates the career and leadership opportunities for musicians on and off stage. My research into AI is fully embedded within this grant, working to do some of the surveys that we have done, summer camp for high school kids, and then just finished a collegiate course, the second round of a collegiate course, working with students at Eastman.
And I'm Raphaela Barassi. I direct the Center for Learning in the Digital Age at the Warner School of Education. And I'm a mathematics educator by training, so this is really a stretch for me in terms of working in the area of music and AI, but my work in the last few years has been really focused on application and implication of AI for education, and this was really a fascinating project to be in, to understand how can that affect art education, but also what implication we can get for education more generally.
Fantastic. So I want to start by noting that things are moving very quickly in this space. So whatever we say here today might, be out of date by next month, 6 months, a year at a time. But I wanted to start by asking each of you, in your domain, how is AI already showing up in music? or music education? And what is something surprising you found or one misconception you want to correct about AI? So maybe we'll start with Xiao.
Yeah. So as a researcher in the audio AI field, we know things are coming because AI has been here for music and audio for decades. But what I didn't predict a few years ago was that AI sound generation has been advancing so quickly in the past couple of years. We know Suno and Udio, these softwares, they can generate a full sound with just a single mouse click and a short text prompt. I didn't predict this, and I hope I could correct my misconception.
Fantastic. Maybe Raffaella
Sure.
first. Yeah.
I think for me, it's been really understanding how it's not AI itself, but it's how AI is used that really makes a big difference in terms of particularly how we use it in education, but in art and everything else. So I think really stopping to think and talk about AI in generic terms, but being very focused on how people use it. And I think, again, a good example that Rachel is going to show next is how the students in her course have used AI to create pieces of music. And I think that has been a big surprise for me to really see how they were able to integrate the AI with their creativity, not to lose it, but to enhance it.
Before I answer, can we play a couple snapshots of...
Sure. Yeah.
So what you're going to hear is 2 examples of the final products that were done in this class. They were just presented last week. One is a beginning snapshot that mixes audio and visual, and the second is audio only. And that's all I'll say at the moment.
Houston, we have a problem.
I adopted 32 cats and dogs.
Where are you at in your life right now?
At my limits.
It's my own fault for using PowerPoint.
So Rachel, just to clarify, that was made entirely by generative AI or?
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
And this team decided that they wanted to take a comedic theme. And so they used all different types of AI to create the rhythm and the beat and, prompts to help guide that music that you heard, but then juxtaposed it with snippets of other comedy things that are found. I'm certain you recognize some of those on there. Yeah, so that was the first team, the audio only, and that was fully created using AI.
Protect the youth, for they are our future. They are the path to healing, and we're still learning to breathe. The path to knowledge, where every question matters and every mind is fed. The path to equality, that isn't just promised, but practiced. A path to society that remembers every child is born with worth, not earned, not granted, but undeniable. Protect the youth, for their hands rest the world we hope to deserve.
In the morning light, a child walks slow, book bag torn, but I still glow. Dreams stitched tight and worn out seams, hoping the world will hear their dreams. The classroom walls are cracked and thin, the burning burns like fire within. They reach for stars that they cannot see, whispering, will the world reach back for me? Protect the youth, protect the flame, give them hope, give them a name, feed their minds and feed their
soul until their stories all are whole. Protect the youth, protect the dawn. The world keeps turning, life goes on. But if we guard their dreams today, a brighter world won't fade away.
That example mixes both the audio and the visual, yet there's more human-created elements in there. So the lead vocal you heard was one of the students. The opening violin was one of the students. But the rhythms underneath, the visuals that were created, the chorus that comes in at the refrain, those are all AI-generated elements. So this group really combined that human and AI creativity together. And we bookended the class at the beginning and the end with a discussion of what does creativity mean, and can you still have your own control of creativity even when AI is in the mix. It was a debate that was not resolved at the end of class, but as you can see from these examples, they're incredibly creative. And I would argue that had AI not been involved, the students would not have produced a project like this. And I should also back up and say that the audio-visual example, the lyrics were AI generated and then refined by the students too. So a complete meld of human and AI creativity.
Yeah. What's interesting I find about those videos and those audio products is how sort of skeptical the students' tone is about AI, even as they're using it to create this response to the existence of music in AI. I think that's it's really cool to see.
Yeah.
If I may ask a quick question. Sure. Did the students use a set of AI tools or a single tool?
They had full creativity, and both of these projects use several different tools.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, interesting. And I think that leads into our sort of next set of questions, which is how can we use AI as a creative co-worker, right? Or is that something that's possible? How should we be doing it? And I think I want to start with Xiao. People are really interested in searching for the best AI music generator or AI mixing tools or whatever. And from your perspective, what are some of the systems today that are genuinely good at music production, and where do they still absolutely need a human ear and musical judgment?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, I didn't predict that AI song generation could advance so quickly. Right. So in this direction of research, the results are really impressive to me. As a auditory user, I can just input a short text prompt and generate a song, and I can listen to it. If I didn't have musical knowledge or music composition skills, I could not do that before. So I think this is why this AI song generation technology is so popular these days. But is that all? I don't think so. Especially for professional musicians, I don't think the current AI song generation technology has the controllability to satisfy professional musician and music producers' needs. For example, if let's say in the text prompt, I say I want to generate a song with 7/8 meter. Maybe the song generator is not that. Typically, it's just a 4/4 meter song because that's the most common song out there as a training data. So AI models do not always follow human text prompts. And if, say, the user wants to change it, there's no good way to change that. For example, if I don't like the melody, or I don't like the harmony, or I don't like the rhythmic groove, how can I change it easily? With current AI models, it's not very easy. This is actually exactly the motivation of our software framework developed under this TEAMuP project. We call it HARP. It's a software framework that can help connect the AI models world and the music producers world. So the AI models can be easily deployed into the digital audio workstations, which are the main tools for music production. The music producers and musicians can enjoy those most advanced AI models and provide some feedback as they use them in their workflow.
Yeah, I think that that's really helpful because when I think of AI music generation, I think of the sort of like canned music generators where you just type in, I want a techno beat with lyrics about Australia or something like that. And those produce a lot of really good kitsch and like really sort of canned music, but then sort of integrating it into this creative workflow seems much more difficult and, something that we're sort of struggling with right now. So on that idea, Rachel, are some musicians starting to treat AI as a creative co-worker? And, in what ways are they finding the most meaningful uses of AI?
Probably not a surprise, but you will get answers that are on all ends of the spectrum. And even in the class that was represented, there were some students that came in with some amount of AI fluency, and there was other students that said they rarely use AI, right? And so in ways to use AI as a creative partner, I'll just take this class as an example. Throughout the 14 weeks, we had a variety of experiencing using different tools, talking with different professionals, seeing what and where the industry is at right now, and what this means for their future work and career possibilities. So on that lens, hearing from professionals, it was very eye-opening that if students want to stay current, it's worth their while to at least test out what AI is doing. Now, I'm certain we'll get into ethics and complications and legal things later in this discussion, but that's the complicating piece with all of this. And then the other piece that's complicated is students wrestling with what is my own creativity versus what is the creativity of something else? Where is that delineation? And can they make that challenge happen? There's something to be said for any discipline, music included. You have to know what you're doing on your instrument. You have to know the fundamentals, you have to know the theory, you have to know the history. You need to know what that is. No amount of AI can replace that study and that physical practice. Right? So you have to have that fluency first to then be able to discern, is what AI is producing, is that correct? Is that in the 7/8 rhythm? Right? One of the challenges that the audiovisual group had is that the metronome was off by 5/100ths of a beat. Yeah. So after a minute, they had to readjust and get things to line up again. If you didn't know about music, you might not realize what's happening and be able to address that.
Can I add something to that? Because I had the pleasure to actually observe the course and be in some of the group when they were creating these kind of things. And I would agree. I mean, I'm not a person with a musical background, and it was fascinating to hear how the students were talking and commenting on what they were getting from AI, what they liked, what they didn't like, why, how they wanted to change it. And I think the final products really are a good example of how AI can be a co-creator and not take away from creativity from people who I would say are professional musicians. But then I think of it from the point of view of people who are not professional musicians like me. And as an educator, I would love to be able to put some music when I create some videos that are educational videos. And the possibility to use some of these tools opens up new opportunity that we didn't have before. Because honestly, I will never be able to pay for musicians to do a background music or whatever. But also this really can sort of try to express again, what is it that I really want from this video? And is there some music that could help with that? So I think it's always important to see the perspective of the user. In most of the cases, I would say that the creative use, AI as a co-creator means that you use AI as an assistant, as an enhancer of what you can do, something to make you more independent. In a few occasions, you can use it as a substitute when you don't know how to do those things at all. And that's where, in a sense, I think people get more into the questioning of, is it ethical? Is it taking other people's jobs away? But I think that, again, seeing all that spectrum is important when we talk about AI as a co-creator.
Yeah, that's really helpful, I think, to make that distinction between using AI as a substitute for human creativity as opposed to an assistant to human creativity or an augmentative technology. Yeah, that's really helpful. So thinking about that then, Xiao, you've described the project that we have all been working on. You've mostly been involved in the technical part of that. Imagine that we succeed in making really powerful AI tools widely available inside open source music production systems like Audacity. How might that shift the boundary, you think, between professional music producers and bedroom music producers or amateur music producers, right? And what might that mean for the future of the recording industry?
Yeah, I think this tool we are developing will really lower the barrier to entry into the music production world. So imagine a songwriter who is good at coming up with a catchy melody, but may not know the skills of music arrangement. Now they can use this AI tool software framework to employ some AI models and do the arrangement for them.
Yeah.
And I want to mention that this software framework is not only for open source DAWs, it can also be connected to commercial DAWs like Logic, Pro Tools, Cubase, Reaper. That's really the power of this software framework. It connects the AI models world and these commercial digital audio workstations that musicians, music producers, professional or semi-professional always use.
Can you give me an example of a model that you might use in that music production process? Like we're injecting these models into Reaper or Pro Tools or Audacity. What kind of a thing would we want to do with those AI models in that DAW?
Yes, so currently we have about 12 models deployed into the framework already. And our hope is to expand this list of models to 100 by next year, summer next year.
Yeah.
And so this set of models will cover many different kind of use cases. For example, we already have a source separation model where you can run the model to separate the vocals from the bass, from the guitars, from drums. And there's also a model about music continuation. Let's say you already have a segment of music that you have, and then you can run the model to continue that music for whatever length you want to have. We also have a model to do harmonization. So you have a melody, and then we can employ the model to harmonize the melody into a polyphonic piece.
That's really helpful for my own understanding of how it might augment human creativity, right? So I can see how I'm a musical artist, someone who perhaps I'm a singer-songwriter, but I don't have the tool set to pay for a professional demo with source separation. I can use these kinds of open source tools and open source models to separate out my guitar mic from my vocal mic sort of automatically, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you could have very quick tryout of different kind of models.
Yeah.
And you can do experimentation. You can then, decide which final model you want to use, or maybe you want to really hire a professional musician to do the job. But, in the early stage of songwriting or music production, I guess experimentation is very important.
Yeah.
And this tool provides that opportunity for quick experimentation.
That's super helpful, yeah. So Rachel, from your vantage point, working with these emerging music leaders, there's this tension, it feels like, between having these new tools that enable lots of creativity and paid work, new roles and opportunities. So what kinds of new roles and opportunities do you see opening up because of AI, as opposed to AI taking jobs away from working musicians?
I mean, that's the big question, right? We don't know exactly what's happening. And if I can take a step back just a minute, AI is a disruption in the quote unquote marketplace. This is not the first disruption that there's been, right? There's been disruptions when recorded sound happened and using recordings of orchestras to put behind movies or in clubs instead of hiring a band. And then when cassette tapes and CDs and MP3s came out and the rise and fall of Napster and what that took away from artists, but then unions stepped in and the government stepped in, right? So it takes a minute to catch up to that. So we're just at another disruption point in the industry. But I think the possibilities really are up to the creativity that each musician brings. What is it that they want to be doing with their art, with their music? And as has been said by colleagues here, what could they not do otherwise because of financial limitations or anything else? Using AI as a partner to at least dip a toe in the water of what they want to be doing, to have those iterative processes that give them a good sense of what is possible. You know, whether that means there's a new definition of what it means to be a musician that wears many hats, right? You aren't just the performer, but you have the ability to not just record yourself, but edit yourself or put video with it or put orchestration with it in ways that would have been prohibitive before. So I think the possibilities really are limited by a musician's own creativity. The doors are open.
Yeah.
And again, just adding to that a little bit, it's fascinating to me to see how the perspective, again, of the user may change how we look at that. I love what Zhao said about how AI can really help at the prototyping stage, at the exploring stage, in a way that is not taking away from anybody else. It's really just increasing the creativity and the quality of the product. But then you can also see that the same person that now is liberated and can do their own production is taking away a job from the person that before was an audio engineer or was a person that was, again, helping in a studio to do that production. So there are always different sides that you have to look at. And sometimes I feel when I read debates or things in the media that you only look at one side and you forget all these complicated issues of, again, different people being affected in a different way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when I think about these kinds of questions about whether or not it's going to be an enabler for more sort of interesting or productive art versus whether or not it's going to take jobs away from working artists and make the business of art more difficult, I know that there's another side to that coin, which is what are the consumers of art, the people who buy art or pay for art, what do they want? And I think there is still a real hunger for authenticity in art, and in particular a real hunger for human touch in art. And I think that's something that, you know, gives me a lot of hope that it's going to likely be an enabler rather than something that is simply going to take jobs away from working artists. Yeah. So I want to shift gears a little bit to thinking about how we learn with AI and what impact AI is going to have on musical learning. The project that we've been involved in includes, in addition to the technical domain, includes an education domain where we have a music technology course that's running at the college level, a summer camp for high school students, as well as online resources that have been generated for music educators. And I wanted to ask Rachel, you know, what are the key learning outcomes that you want people to walk away with from those courses? Is it technical fluency, creative confidence, critical or skeptical eye of AI? What is the thing you want people to come away with from those?
First and foremost for me, what I personally want people to come away with is the confidence to explore, because AI is changing day on day, week on week. So any technical skills that you learn today may be outdated by next week, right? As with anything else. But that mindset of being open to learning, being open to exploring, being open to seeing, is this tool, could it be a piece of my creative framework or an aid in some way or another? So that's what I really hope people come away with, regardless of what level they are at, understanding that this industry will continue to change. AI is evolving super fast. So having that inspiration to stay curious and your willingness to learn about AI.
There is also another aspect. Your question, John, focused on what you want them to learn as musicians. But when I look at it from a bigger perspective of as an educator, especially when we do the summer camp, one of our goals was also, can they come to appreciate what technology and AI can do, and that they can get involved in technology even if they see themselves more as an artist rather than a technical kind of person, because by doing so, they may open themselves to careers that they may not have thought before, that may be actually more likely to allow them to use music as their main source of income than if you think of just a traditional way of being a musician. And so seeing again that using AI in music making could be an interesting pathway for people to consider technical careers they would not have thought before. When you think again of the importance of increasing STEM education and how many people instead are turned away from that, that is an important value that we should consider as well.
Yeah, as a person with 2 degrees in philosophy, the idea of having multiple strings to my bow in the marketplace really resonates with me. So I can absolutely appreciate that. So Xiao, from your vantage point, and I know a little bit about you as well, which is that you're not only a professor of engineering, you are also a reasonably accomplished violinist. Is that correct?
Intermediate level.
An intermediate level of violinist. But so from your perspective as someone who dabbles a little bit more than dabbles in music, what kinds of AI-driven feedback or practice tools do you think could be helpful in deepening musical understanding?
Yeah, so in my view, music practices and music education in general is very important for everyone, for kids, for adults, for seniors. It's very good for cognitive training, for physical skills, and for meditation, I would say. So using AI as a tool to help with music practices and music learning is one goal of my research. Actually, I'm a co-founder of a company that develops a software that can provide feedback to music instrument learners on intonation and rhythm accuracy. So we have a lot of users using this tool when they practice their violin. And they have found that it's very effective to find out those intonation and rhythmic errors during their self-practice at home, so that when they come back to see the teacher can focus more on musicality, expression, and phrasing, not the low-level mistakes anymore. So I think AI has a lot of potential to help music practices and music learning. I'll give you another example, which is for music improvisation. In our lab, we developed a tool called Bach Duet. This is an AI agent that can play duet improvisation in the style of Bach counterpoint in real time with a human musician. We know that those classical musicians hundreds of years ago, like Bach and Chopin, they were also improvisers. But in nowadays classical music education, I don't think improvisation is emphasized enough. We believe this tool is able to bring back or help bring back the culture of improvisation into classical music education. And this is an ambitious goal, but users of our tool have told us that it's really fun to play with, and they believe that this can help them to practice improvisation on their own.
Oh, really fascinating. Yeah. So I want to ask, and myself as a parent of a young child who now lives in an age of AI, I know that I ask myself this a lot, which is AI good for kids who are learning, whether that be music or something else? And I wanted to ask to go around the panel and ask, you to respond to that. What do you think that AI can be a support for kids learning, and what guardrails do you think parents or schools need to put in place to make sure that it's a support? Maybe we'll start with.
Sure. Well, that's a big question, right?
That's right.
Everyone is asking, but it has been asked also for previous kind of tools. As I said, I'm a math educator, so of course I've lived through the calculator growth and use, and there have been tons of debates there about is it going to ruin the next generation because it will not be able to calculate and so on. And I think that, yes, you don't want to substitute, again, the calculator for people understanding number concept, understanding, notations, understanding the basics of arithmetic operations. Yeah. But having the calculators allow you to move students to do more complex math later on. Because, for example, when I went to school, I had to learn how to do square roots by hand.
Yeah.
Nobody does it now, but nobody needs to do it now.
Right.
And so, again, as I said before, it's really how you use these tools. And that's particularly important for educators to think about that. I think what Rachel said before, that you need to have a certain knowledge base, a certain understanding of music theory, and so on, in order to use these tools well. It's true with anything with AI, and it's true in the case of the calculator, to go back to that example. So I think that as educators, we need to really think about when and how to introduce the AI so that we don't take away that development of very basic concept and skills, but also reevaluate what level of skills may be needed in the technical field, and go back to thinking more about what are the big conceptual things that we may want instead to focus in school, and would that open up some time to do more creative things and more exploration that are also very important.
Yeah, that's helpful. Rachel?
Yes to everything Rafaela just said. When I first heard your question, the thing that came to my mind is the element of play, right? And as a child or as any learner, you need to have that discovery for yourself and that curiosity and that figuring out, why does this work or why does something else not work? And of course that changes the older any of us get, but you need to maintain that before you use AI for something in any type of teaching, because AI, whatever it produces an answer, whether it's right or wrong, but you aren't going to know if it's right or wrong unless you know the theory or the history or the mechanics behind whatever it is you're doing, whether it's math or music or any type of creation, right? And so knowing that core fundamental of the industry, of the creativity that you're in, and then I don't know what the right guardrails are, right? You can look at the statements that most any university has online about how do you use AI in teaching or as a student or as a faculty member. We all are living this together and trying to figure it out. The other piece that complicates it is, figuring out where AI is pulling its information from. Is it fully representative of what's out there? Or are there big pieces that are missing? And that takes someone who is knowledgeable in their degree and their discipline to be able to understand and know. So I don't know what the right answer is, but it's worth continuing to explore and have these questions that continue to iterate and evolve.
Perfect.
I agree with all these points. I want to add that I think there's still very large potential for us to deploy AI technology into all sectors of music education. For example, at elementary school and secondary schools, orchestras have kids with varying levels of music instrument performance skills. It's actually very difficult for the music teacher to find a piece that can fit everyone. So we can use AI to rearrange the piece into different difficulty levels for different parts, right? Maybe the violin part is very difficult because the kids are already very good at playing the instrument. Maybe another part, we can use AI to reduce the difficulty level to fit the students in the orchestra. So this is just one use case, right? And also we can use AI to, for example, teach music theory. Maybe the students compose something, and then we can use AI to make suggestions about the harmony to go along with it, or the rhythmic structure to make it more interesting. But as Rachel mentioned, there is a fine line that we have to be care about. That is, how much of usage of AI is appropriate for this age group. I think this is an open question. If we rely on AI too much, then the students cannot develop their own judgment, their own skills. For example, whether it's about intonation or rhythmic accuracy, or about music composition and music theory. We want to use AI as a tool to help the learning, but we cannot rely on AI too much, which would actually prevent the students from learning more.
Connected with what you're saying is, if you look at education more generally, AI is really looked at as a way you can differentiate instruction. You can differentiate instructional materials. And that's really very important, because in any classroom you have different kind of abilities. And in the past, we have been obliged to teach for a certain level because an individual teacher could not differentiate as well. But now AI could give us other opportunities that we didn't have before.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So I want to now sort of turn to some broader issues that sort of touch on the ethics of creating and using these AI models. And there's been a big cultural conversation, I think, around whether generative AI use in music is ethical at all. You know, is it stealing from artists given the way that the models are trained? Who owns the AI-generated songs? So I wanted to ask, sort of as a question to the panel, you know, what ethical issues around consent and training data and credit giving do you think musicians and educators most urgently need to consider?
That's a big one. I can jump in. I certainly don't have a final answer for any of this, but there is a large cultural conversation going on around any AI, not just music related. Where is it pulling information from? Is it giving the credit? Oftentimes, no. And musicians who have had or see new outputs influenced by AI that have their music as a piece of it have very mixed reactions. Yeah. Right? Especially when it's not credited. They have put in the time and the energy and the expertise to create that product, and to have it used in a way that they didn't intend, and they aren't making any money from it. That is the heart of this disruption right now. Yeah. Right? And it's complicated because it's the feelings and the respect for the musician and the artist that are creating it. It's the economic piece that's challenging all of this too. And then there's the legal implications as to what are those official guardrails that we need to adhere to. And then on the flip side, as the user, what are my ethical constraints? If I understand this is the big problem right now, why am I using this, right? Or what is my responsibility to understand where this is pulling from and credit those artists, or and. It's just a big spiral, and there's so many different layers. And I think it resides both with the user of AI. It involves with with the industry. It involves the artists and the creators. It involves everybody to provide their perspectives and what they are and are not comfortable with.
Yeah. Go ahead.
In education, though, we are in a slightly different situation.
Yeah.
There always has been an acceptance. Even copyright is treated differently because when you are trying to teach someone, you are allowed to use articles and without paying for it and stuff like that. Right. So I think that issue, which is a real issue when you get to the commercial side, maybe a little less relevant for education in terms of, again, we are all there to try to get people to learn. And when the students create a product, they're not going to commercialize it. It's really a product that is part of their learning process. But having the students be aware of the issues is important because later on, they may want to use AI in different ways.
Yeah.
I think on the industry side, this is probably the $1 million question right now, right, to resolve this copyright.
Maybe the $1 billion question.
Yeah, maybe. It's a huge market. So it is not ethical for music generation companies to use human-created sounds without their consent to train AI models and then generate sounds that will actually replace those human musicians in the revenue making. So yeah, that's my opinion. But I think right now there are lawsuits between the music generation companies and also music labels, for example, Sony, right, those music label companies. I think this needs to be resolved. I don't know how, but I'm thinking maybe technology can help. I'm always thinking about ideas like maybe watermarking technologies to watermark those human-created music. And then even when those music generation models are using those human-created music to train their models, and the generated sound will still carry those watermark. Then we can really protect and, more importantly, attribute the credit back to the human musicians. Yeah. I was thinking if the technology is there, we can envision a new ecosystem where maybe musicians will be willing to contribute their musical ideas and compositions to train advanced AI models, such that the generated music from those models can actually blend or fuse music ideas from many human musicians. I like to make an analogy with the academic publishing enterprise. You know, when we write a paper, we always cite many previous works. Yeah. And we attribute those credits to the previous authors, right? I think in music production, maybe we could have a model like that. When a new song is created, the ideas that were borrowed from previous songs can be credited. You know, something like that. But technology needs to play an important role to build this new ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that idea that, you know, we can maybe potentially use technology to help us attribute credit for the kinds for the songs that we've drawn on stylistically, or the places where we have maybe, you know, taken a melody or taken a beat and changed it, maybe subtly or not, or maybe not changed it at all, and integrated it into a new musical piece. And previously, that was all sort of a gestalt process. That remix, you know, unless someone, you know, was clearly taking a sample from somewhere else, there was a very difficult process of figuring out how to attribute credit. And maybe technology, these AI models can help us figure out what the stylistic influences are and then appropriately assign credit or revenue or you know, other things to the original artists. So one other question I have is, you know, I've argued in my own work in the medical field on the ethics of AI that there should almost always be a human in the loop for high stakes decisions, and in particular, high stakes decisions need to be made by humans so that someone can be held responsible and accountable for the decision making. In AI-enabled music, you know, what do you think counts as a high-stakes decision? You know, where is it sort of acceptable, either ethically or aesthetically acceptable for AI to act autonomously, and where do we really want humans to have control and a hand?
You're all looking at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that, again, this is a huge gray area because depending on who you talk to, they will have different answers, right? If you look at musicianship and creativity pre-AI, you knew that what was being produced came from that individual that had their name on it.
Yeah.
Every amount of attribution, you could trace where that came from and you knew who it came from, regardless of how high the stakes are. In music, the stakes, it may not be at the medical level, right? But they impact people's livelihoods. Even a student who just wants the experience of testing something out and AI makes it possible, that's taking a job away from somebody that used to get paid before. So to that student and that experience, that's low stakes to them, but to that person who used to get paid, that's high stakes for them.
Right. Yeah.
And you can just expand that example to anything in music. So it's really hard to put a line in the sand and say this is low stakes and this is high stakes, because the implications of using AI impact every single area of this business.
Yeah, I would add something about ordinary people, not only musicians. I think music is one of the most important cultures of humankind. Yeah. And music making is so interesting, so, what's the word? Innate to humans. Yeah. And throughout the history, we have been using different kind of technology to help with music making. Humans developed thousands of kinds of instruments with different acoustics, and people developed electric instruments, synthesizers, and digital audio workstations, music notation software. All of these tools are to help humans to interact with music, interact with the audience. Now AI, I don't think it's so different. AI is another tool that we should use it to help people make music, to interact with music. So from this perspective, my hope is that although AI is so advanced, let's still practice music, still study music, still take music lessons with music teachers, not only just listen to AI-generated songs.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I mean, from my own perspective, I think making, writing lyrics or making music seems to me to be a really profound experience, right? Mm-hmm. Something that's the act of that creation is really meaningful to me as a human being. And so when you use AI in a kind of in a fully automated way, you sort of risk losing that experience for yourself, right?
At the same time, though, here speaks a person who's not musical or artistic. Right. I've never had that experience because I didn't have the talent, because I didn't have the training. So if you look from the point of view of the amateur or the everyday kid, are we taking away their opportunities to experience this if we take away AI? Or if we, put too strong guardrails. So it's back to the issue of, again, who are you talking to? What are their potential gains or, losses? And the users, the people who also enjoy the music, I think often maybe not considered enough in this kind of conversations.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And, I have sort of one last little question in this discussion about ethics, which is, how can AI and music reduce inequities instead of sort of expanding or replicating inequalities in musical expression and understanding?
Well, that's connected with what I just said.
Yeah.
I think it could really open up to more people, to more especially young people, the experience of creating music, not just receiving it or processing it.
Yeah.
Yes, as we have mentioned, I think AI will lower the barrier to entry of music activities. And also, I want to make a point that AI is not only about music generation. There are also two other important aspects. One is perception, whether it's perceiving the audio of music or perceiving the human body movement, facial expressions of musicians. And the other one is performance, having AI or an embodied system to play a music piece expressively through both sound and also visual rendering and physical movement. These are two important aspects. I would say the perception aspect is very important for music education and tutoring, and it will allow many, many kids who did not have access to music teachers now to enjoy music lessons. So from this perspective, I think AI is able to reduce inequalities.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Yes, to what both my colleagues have said. I guess I was thinking kind of separately, going back to the class experience and reflecting on what some of the students experienced when we shared different audio or visual of AI-generated things. As trained musicians, they could tell the difference between what was AI-generated and what was not, right? And so to your point of what that experience is, of music creation, of artistic creation, I think there's a need for that. There always will be a need for that. And I appreciate that AI can reduce the barriers to entry for children or for other individuals that want to experience this and don't have any other way. I love that. For musicians who have experienced that connection and that uniqueness that is creating something with somebody else, once you experience that, I don't think you'll ever let it go. There's nothing that can replace that moment of sharing a concert on stage with somebody or being in an audience and feeling how many people working together for that same moment. Nothing will ever replace that, even with AI.
Perfect. So we're coming to the end of our conversation here, but I just wanted to end with one sort of summary question, which is, if a student or a community musician came up to you and asked you, how can I use AI to be more creative, not less? What would you say to them?
Well, to me, if you want to be good at something, you have to practice for that thing, whether it's physical strength or creativity. If you want to improve creativity, you have to practice creativity. So my suggestion would be try to avoid use AI to replace such practice. Try to use AI to augment your creativity and to learn from those augmentations.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, mine's very similar. I feel like the brain is a muscle, right?
Yeah.
And if you, as a student, identify you want to be more creative about something, what is that? How can you go learn that yourself? Practice that muscle first. Build your own curiosity, your own expansiveness. And then once you feel you have exhausted everything, then maybe go to AI and see how it can be a thought partner with you. But if you rely just on AI, you lose building that muscle of creativity, of your own individual learning.
I would say start with what are you trying to accomplish, and then think of AI as a tool for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, this conversation has been extremely stimulating, and I'm excited to see where this project ends up. I want to thank each of you again, Professor Raffaella Barassi, Rachel Roberts and Zhao Duan, for taking the time to talk with us today, and hopefully we will get to talk more about AI, music and creativity in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.